Welcome. My name is Christopher Peter. During a long trip on Memorial Day, I read the book many pundits were talking about, Original Sin, written by Jake Tapper of CNN and Alex Thompson of Axios. Well, read is not the right word. I listened to it on Audible as I do with many books. Great way to enjoy a book while doing something else at the same time. There was much hype, it seems, heading into the release. My first thought was that it was an obvious topic to approach if you are a member of the media who is staunchly in the Democratic camp. To be the person that comes clean when many want to simply watch the era pass by, but to try to find out what really happened, who was really responsible, and shed light on what transpired. Sure, it is the words of many anonymous sources. Many people prefer that people put their name on statements rather than hide. These individuals want to share what they heard and what they saw, without losing the potential of future opportunity or facing retaliation. To be honest, they are simply confirming what many Republicans thought all along, and was not as bad as Democrats feared. The one thing that it confirmed was that elections have consequences, not just for the voters, but for the political parties, society, our economy, and our geopolitical policies, especially in a winner-take-all democracy, where voters select candidates rather than parties. Parliamentary systems are a little less susceptible to the will of the voters because the party is on the ballot and the process is impacted with other actions like negotiations that take place in the multi-party systems. Throughout our history, there have been times when Republicans have enjoyed strong connection with the broadest segments of the electorate, and other times when Democrats appeared like they may never lose another election for the foreseeable future. But the fortunes of each party can change based on results. If you do not deliver and fail to govern in a manner deemed effective, then the voters will turn away from your slate of candidates. Especially if your party is homogeneous, which each party has been at certain times throughout our recent history, which makes sense as political candidates will galvanize around ideas that voters support or ones that win elections, whether the candidate truly accepts it as valid dogma. Sometimes political movements can weed out candidates that do not align with the prevailing views, which we have seen greatly with the progressive flu that hit Democrats and to some degree the MAGA movement for Republicans. The only time monolithic thinking is a problem when the party experiences catastrophic election results. Otherwise, those in positions of power in the party can pass off weaker than expected performances as a one-off or just fatigue. When the results are clear as day, a political realignment, then we see the start of what some will describe as an internal civil war inside a party as it finds a new message and leadership. We saw this in the Republican Party, after the end of the Bush presidency, where there was a great level of anger resonating from the financial crisis. Many compassionate conservative Republicans were eventually pushed out in favor of early Tea Party Republicans. Eventually, the party moved towards a brand of populist republicanism under President Trump, as the party struggled to push Obama out of office. There are still plenty of what some would describe as traditional Republicans, while the national base is growing and President Trump is the real galvanizing force that has brought many people who have not supported either party into the Republican Party. Republicans are growing at a much faster rate than Democrats in many areas. But a great seismic political shift also is a result of President Trump external to the Republican Party. The Democrat Party was greatly impacted by the 2016 defeat by President Donald Trump, shattering the view that Democrats would just continue passing the keys to the White House to political dynasties within the party. As a result, there was clearly a shift in how Democrats viewed themselves and how Americans viewed many political institutions. We saw back then a shift from a general center-left ideological leaning to a runaway train to progressivism. During the Obama era, President Obama was a far leftist with a pliant center-left Congress. The Democrat base, with the influx of young voters that were still living at home with massive college bills, wanted to push these voices out in favor of what they thought would be a new voice. In 2020, Joe Biden was seen as a center-left candidate who could bring rationality, simply because he was the only one not spewing radical socialist talking points, mainly because he probably did not know what was going on at the time, but was still witty enough to make pop shots at moments and benefited from a pandemic-impacted election cycle where he could be effectively managed. The Biden era was a historical disaster in many ways, despite what Tapper and Thompson want you to believe. Biden has so many massive failures and controversial lapses in judgment. Any event that appeared like success was usually just a narrative taking credit for something that had nothing to do with his policies or actions, just confirming the notion that Democrats will take credit for the work of the people and place blame on them when their radical policies fail. The biggest success was how they kept the public from knowing about the physical and mental condition of a sitting president, eventually tossing Joe Biden off the ticket in a manner reminiscent of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where Uncle Phil threw Jazz out the door. Now, the party is experiencing its own civil war. The party galvanized around progressivism, and even the center-left president became that Trojan horse for the progressive agenda. Clearly, the Democrat brand is fractured and it continues to flounder publicly. While some want to try to turn the page quickly, there has to be some form of reckoning with the biggest cover-up in recent history. First and foremost, I wish nothing but the best for the former president and a speedy full recovery. I did not read the book because of a thirst to hear bad things about Joe Biden, but I think all Americans should know the truth and see to what extent a presidential administration was able to deceive many Americans in an era of continuous information. Obviously, there were plenty of people who did not buy the cover-up, and people like Jake Tapper himself played a key role in the media's part to push the narrative that Biden was completely fine. He is no saint by admitting now the problem that he denied for 4 years. We're in the cover your butt part of the scandal, where people want to confess their roles hoping for late honesty can afford them some forgiveness for future party roles. Remember, they played a major part in keeping a president no longer able to perform his role in power, blocking other contenders. For all those voices clamoring for greater government oversight of speech, this is clearly an example of why free speech is important and why people should freely question their government, regardless of who is in power. We are seeing how information is controlled by those in power, especially in the big government-minded elected officials that want to maintain the narrative. As it stands now, President Trump and the Republican Party have effectively aligned themselves lock and step with the broader American public on the issues that voters feel are critical and salient to the future of our great nation. I have talked about the growing Democrat disconnect, and we are seeing the consequences. Look at the New Jersey Democratic gubernatorial primary, for example. Democrats completely have no answer to the problems New Jerseyans are facing. Like national Democrats, they are trying to fabricate problems that they want to address to look like they will be effective, and even turning to spectacles to try to reach the far-left fringes of the electorate, in a state that has moved rightward lately. As a person who left New Jersey for a period of time and returned, it has drastically declined under Phil Murphy, and the Democrats have no vision. Trump is not the problem New Jersey is facing. To be fair, Biden was not the biggest problem either. It was the ineffective policies and poor management of critical functions that are the direct responsibility of those inside the Garden State border. The reason why I think President Trump appeals to a broad segment of society and maintains popularity is because he is not ideologically tied to conservatism or liberalism. He is able to proceed with what he believes is the right approach to the problem and adapts, not adhering to ideological prescriptions. Good leaders solve problems in the manner the situation calls for. Democrats have a problem, and maybe the pending civil war in the party may prove to be helpful. Some are calling for drastic change, but the change those voices want will only make the problem worse. When AOC and independent Bernie Sanders are the face of the party, you might have a bad case of the progressive flu. The only effective vaccine for the progressive flu is common sense, economic literacy, and understanding the real news beyond the curated presentations of any network.
Politicians tend to view their records in a favorable bias towards themselves. Many Americans view records on how issues they feel strongly were impacted by the decisions made by that elected official. So let us look at the issue from a policy perspective. It is clear that they are grooming candidates from an ideology that the broader population of Americans are moving away from. Americans tried progressive liberalism as a light version of socialism and realized that it was clearly not effective and completely idiotic. So, it is not surprising that people are now turning away towards a more centrist version or center-right, where America typically is at. So how do we measure the effectiveness of an elected official, primarily a head of state? We judge how well the economy performed and whether that was a result of their policies. We look at how their domestic policies work to make our communities safer and services perform up to expectations. And we look at their foreign policy to see what impact they had on the world stage, or were they just wandering off on stage. During this ideological battle Democrats will go through, they will try to put together a platform on these three areas, where the person driving the messaging will hope to position him or herself into the front-runner spot for 2028. Let us start with the most important issue, the economy, which funds everything our governments and society is able to do. There is a clear disconnect between how the broadest segment of the American population viewed the performance of the progressive economics, or Bidenomics, that was experienced over the past 4 years. Many of the repercussions are still filtering through our system as we try to pass the progressive flu. But the voices vying for the top spot are going to try to make the argument that Bidenomics was not the best progressives have to offer. The Trump economic vision is to position the American economy as the premier creator of wealth throughout the industrialized world by allowing it to create opportunity by removing the bureaucratic barriers implemented by our economic competitors, our own policymakers, and market inefficiencies caused by inaccurate perceptions held by the general public, either on the supply or the demand side. On the other hand, The progressive voices that have taken hold of the Democratic Party want to put the federal government at the center of the economy, pursuing a central planning style of government that has yet to prove it works. For instance, they are very traditionalist when it comes to healthcare reform. Because they do not want any changes to the centralized approach that did little to benefit consumers, the sick, or any entity besides health insurers. They want to be able to dictate what is provided, how much producers can charge, and who gets it. The clear flaw in their logic is that the government rarely is able to create a product or service that people universally want. Rarely can they do anything in a timely manner that makes operational sense. And their inefficiencies are costly to all involved. Except those able to carve out their protections. We have seen time and time again that the American entrepreneur is the one who is best able to provide innovation and deliver it to the people what they need. All the while, evolving as the people's needs and wants change. The government never changes with the times. It gives what it gives and you either like or they do not care what you think. Because many it is your subconscious microaggressions that make you feel that way. The economic ideas pushed forth by the likes of Bernie Sanders and AOC are not based on reality, but anger. Also, their ideas will not create jobs that will generate the tax revenues, either through income taxes or revenue from economic activity, needed to fund their climate agenda because the people do not want those products and nor do they need them. The practice of coercing economic activity through bans and regulation activity is a direct contradiction to our democratic principles, by the way. The progressive economic vision is not one built on empowering the people but using the people to empower the government. Now, the center-left's economic agenda of ensuring the most vulnerable have a voice and that the market is able to have competition are functional views. There is a need to make sure that every American citizen and legal resident is able to have access to the economic resources they need. Corporations are not able to shield themselves completely from competition. But the idea that the federal government should have a prominent position in the economic matters of society to the extent that it controls what is produced, who gets it, and what prices can be charged is outdated. A relic of Soviet culture. People experienced how our health industry has been damaged and we need to make sure the progressive flu does not spread to other industries. The rhetoric of those fighting for the soul of the Democrats does not match reality. Candidates that are aligned with the positions on the salient issues will win more likely than not. Look at the economic rhetoric being spewed in the New Jersey gubernatorial race. Steve Fulop really thinks New Jersey taxpayers want to pay the state government for tax breaks going to companies to pay workers higher. It might have sounded smarter in his head than when said out loud. People do not want redistribution where the state uses companies as a vessel. They want a business climate where there is growth and opportunity, where workers can attain higher income through income mobility, as new companies come into the market and the labor market moves to full capacity, increasing compensation. A more efficient approach to wage policy. The American people do not want to be a puppet of the government either as a worker, business owner, or any other economic pursuit. The American people want the government to hold bad actors accountable and root out corruption and market inefficiencies.
A quintessential aspect of how well an elected official is doing in their job is how well the policies they champion, the ideas they can help create, and the ultimate decisions they make impact the institutions that are tasked to deliver on enacted legislation and regulations. How well are those policies helping to make our communities safer? How well are these policies making the essential services that only the government can provide work for the American citizens and legal residents? Under Joe Biden, the federal government was not working at its full capacity. Apparently, he was not able to either, and we are learning more about why that was the case. And the new Original Sins book will probably give a bit more insight, I expect. Many of the problems stemming from that time still impacts us today, as there are impact and implementation lags that impact our society and economy. For those that do not know what that means, it refers to the time it takes to change policies and when those policies are actually implemented and the effects are realized. For instance, you may pass a bill to hire more motivational speakers, but it takes time to recruit, vet, and hire and onboard those speakers. That is the implementation lag. Then a period of time before enough people hear their messages before you can fairly gauge the impact. Hence the impact lag. When we talk about domestic policy, the scope may be broad and somewhat ambiguous, but we can focus on how well our government policy helps protect our communities, educate our youth, and care for those in need in effective and efficient manners. A great challenge in this space is the role that personal decisions and behaviors play versus the impact of public policy. For instance, We could have the best education system in the world, but if youth drop out, they are responsible for their economic future outcomes. Let us start with our education system. Public education is essential to having a society able for making effective economic and personal decisions, and people being equipped to care and act on their own behalf. We do not have an education for the purposes of building distrust in each other, finding reasons to be offended when there really are none, or to reject the realities of biology. You spend all that time in school to build skill sets that you will grow and utilize throughout your lifetime. The earlier the better. America has some of the best schools in the world, but we have some of the worst at the same time. Democrats are traditionalists in the sense they want to retain the top-down model that has not worked for quite some time at standardizing quality regardless of community and demographics. Better economic environments produce better school systems and better futures. Otherwise, the student bears a greater share of the responsibility than what is generally fair for a party that lacks the full scope of information needed to accept that responsibility. The one thing I cannot stand hearing from a teacher is when you ask how their program is doing and their response is that it all depends on the quality of the student. Yes, the individual does bear the responsibility of doing what is asked of them and giving maximum effort, but the role of educator is the teacher. If the quality of the student is the sole determining factor, then the teacher is not really doing anything to transform the student or building their skill set. Why should that student attend that class? They may be better off using AI. There are no easy solutions, given the diversity of the environments that our schools operate under. But the best approach may be ensuring the student has the ability to obtain a quality education regardless of the local politics or operational quality. That is why Republicans are consistently gaining ground on the idea of school choice. It is an effective approach at protecting the student's future and allowing them to access the quality of curriculum that is best suited for them. Growing up in a blue state, school choice was effective and used statewide. The argument teachers' unions make is the one around funding. Lowering the headcount reduces the funding level and makes enacting change harder to do. Another way to look at it is that the potential for losing funds will incentivize school leaders and teachers themselves to ensure that quality is highest and that the students get what they need and deserve. Schools should be built around the student and their outcomes, more so than the financial interests of teachers, which is important, but not primary. Our communities are considerably less safe than they were during the first term of President Trump and prior to him. The embracing of policy approaches that amounted to defund the police are clear and obvious. In many states, you can see the noticeable decline in patrolling of police officers, which is empowering those wishing to do harm or people behaving recklessly without regard for others. The deterrent factor is gone essentially, making communities less safe, the result largely of overreacting to the George Floyd death. The American public wants law and order at the same time as due process and accountability for law enforcement when they act outside of the interests of the public. They do not want laws enforced based on a quota system or the past historical indiscretions faced by ancestors who look like the present-day person who just committed an alleged crime against a current citizen or legal resident. There is a real concern about how hard Democrats fight to make criminals appear sympathetic, while the victims of their crimes are shamed and blamed for what was forced upon them. Our government services need to work. When someone has a need that a government agency is supposed to fill, that person should be able to have a straightforward process of connecting with the right person and department to get that need fulfilled. Government services should not feel like canceling a gym or newspaper membership, where the person will simply give up, and we are seeing what happens when the government is not able to function. Part of the lags discussed earlier, the issues that plague the Federal Aviation Agency have been coming to a head over the last year plus. Now, people feel some airports are simply not safe to operate. But this is typical of the government across the board. The Federal Bureau of Investigations now has to move out of a building falling apart and needs to be refocused on its core role as the premier law enforcement agency in America. For much of the time in the past administration, there were clear lapses in how the federal government responded to basic situations and how it completely failed at tasks that were standard and normal. That is why there was talk about the enormous work that would have faced the next president, which is now Trump, who is working to get the federal government back in working order. Responses to natural disasters, funding relief efforts, executing background checks, and many other functions that you would expect to be typical run-of-the-mill tasks that any administration regardless of the president should be able to do. Yet, Democrats want to transfer more power, control, and responsibility to the government. There are many people who do not trust the government regardless. But, the Biden era is a shining example that the quality of government is only as good as the person in charge, which is usually said about businesses as well. Those that view Biden as an effective leader in the era as a positive are suffering not only a severe case of progressive flu, but also political bias. The confusion surrounding Biden and the White House probably played a great role in federal workers feeling like they can do what they want when they should be working. The domestic policy of the Biden administration was quite damaging. And those wishing to be the face of the new Democratic Party are probably even worse, as we are seeing some of the prominent names unable to deliver constituent services effectively. Now, there is legitimate concern that will the changes currently taking place with the size and scope of the federal government impact its ability to perform government services even when giving full effort. Government efficiency is essentially needed, but, like any cost-cutting event, there can be temptation to cut too much or eliminate positions that leaders are not aware were as important as they truly are. But the previous approach of doing less with more does not work either. The tens of thousands of people hired in the past administration were not really working. So there is a need to reach the balance where every worker is exerting maximum effort and the work of the federal government is being done.
President Donald Trump is re-establishing the idea of peace through strength by combining the goal of building up the capabilities and equipment of the American military, while working to keep America out of war. And even ending the wars that broke out during the Biden years. The Democratic Party is traditionally the party that is usually associated with being anti-military conflicts or anti-war. During the Obama era, there was plenty of tough talk by President Barack Obama, but little if anything done to actually deliver consequences. Even President Bill Clinton would order airstrikes to send messages when he deemed appropriate. But the Biden administration's foreign policy has made Democrats the party of war. Under Biden, there was a clear lack of deterrence for military conflicts. While he did not declare any wars, he sure did not stop any either. Russia felt no threat of deterrent when it decided to invade its neighbor in Ukraine. And there was not fear in Hamas to set off its own demise with a terrorist attack against Israel. Rather than embracing Trump's call for peace, Democrats are clamoring for war to continue. Trying to make the argument that any peace that does not give Ukraine back the land lost, not only during the current conflict, but the one previously, is a surrender to Putin. The reality is that Russia is already winning the war and the only way to protect life is to end the conflict, which is what the Trump administration and the rest of the world is trying to do. Russia is not going to give back the land it took, which it was not required to do so in its last invasion either. There is no incentive or real need for its perspective to do so. They are closer to victory and Ukraine is not able to sustain its war efforts without external help. It is the advantageous position with all the leverage. That fact may rub you the wrong way, but it is the reality of the situation. The Democrats under Biden and the current batch do not really have any idea about how to bring peace without committing American troops to the fight. There is no path for victory for Ukraine, which is something the Biden team reportedly understood and so did our European allies. Ending the conflict is the best way to save lives at this point. Secure borders are essential to national security. Ukraine and Israel both showed Americans who wanted to try out a novel idea of open borders. Any nation needs to be able to vet who is coming into its society and what threats they may pose. Even the Obama administration deported illegal immigrants without hesitation. But the Biden administration simply reversed policies that kept the border in somewhat an orderly manner and watched the flooding take place as an ode to the progressive base that wanted open borders. To make matters worse, they then turned around and lied about it. Staging photo ops rather than actually protecting the interests of American voters, citizens, legal residents, communities, and businesses who were all negatively impacted by the purposefully damaging policy. There is no daylight between the new progressive faces that are trying to take hold of the Democratic Party and the open border policy the Biden administration unleashed on our nation. The rebalancing of trade is a major shift in the dogma for global trade. Both parties at some point in recent history have spoken greatly about the issues surrounding globalism and the impact it has had on our domestic producers. Both parties understand that our allies are protecting their economies, but only Republicans seem to be willing to address it. All the rhetoric regarding the global economy and benefits of globalism does no good if our leaders are not able to push back when our economic adversaries or even our allies try to limit our presence in the global market. There will always be a narrative. But the reality is that other nations sought to protect their economy. And our leaders did not want it to look like the top global economy was whining if we pointed out issues. I do think it is important that we pull allies closer to us and see who truly are allies to the American people. We see that the United Kingdom of Great Britain are true allies and were the first to come forward to reach an agreement. One that should have been done a long time ago. We see who else is really a partner or simply truly exploiting us. There is legitimacy in questioning how a policy is implemented. Could we have convinced Europe to align with the United States in a manner other than putting severe economic pressure on them, creating a feeling of commitment by force? Applying maximum pressure on China makes sense, but we could have been more gentle to the Europeans who we could leverage in the pressure campaign to China.
The Democratic Party by complacency lost the right to make claims of what is truth and lies, as they sold to the American people the greatest lie ever told in live situations. This is not Hollywood, where a funny script can be made by people deceiving the public to make a person seem like they are alive when they are not. This is American politics, where the decisions and actions made have major impacts on the people, businesses, and organizations that have to live and operate under those rules. The Hollywood personalities that chose politics over honesty are also to blame, as they played a role in deceiving the electorate with movie schemes to make Biden look and sound better than he really did, which failed miserably. Rather, they should have stood up and stated that Biden should not run, and it amounts to elderly abuse to put someone through a strenuous event when they are clearly not physically or mentally able to do so. Democrats are trying to paint a picture of Republican oligarchy, but they colluded with Hollywood elites and billionaire Democrat donors to attempt to pull the wool over the eyes of the American people. They all wanted access to power and privilege that comes with it. Not saying that those abandoning Biden and flocking to Trump are not looking for something either. But Trump, based on his statement, knows they may have ulterior motives, but if they help the nation, then they can be allowed to do so. Elon Musk has proven time and time again to be a great humanitarian, helping the world where it needs assistance the most. Filled the gap where our federal government could not figure out a way to save our astronauts. And finding efficiency in the federal government may rile those on the benefiting side. Even if they were not aware that their funding was from ill-gotten gains, the American people will finally see some debt relief at some point, hopefully. There used to be two sets of choices for the American people. Now one party runs on personal attacks of the other, and Republicans are running on ideas to empower people and hold them accountable to make their own economic futures and decisions. That is really what all Americans want. This is what freedom is. For me, it will be very hard to trust the Democratic Party, especially given the direction they appear to be headed. The hard reality is that they could care less about how their policies impact the people, only if the people perceive it the way they prefer them to. To their credit, the Republicans broadened their appeal and connected with people feeling left out and those wanting more. Hearing the words of so many Democrats at all levels of government does not give me hope that they truly grasp why Americans turned away from them and why people do not trust them. It is not just the message, it is the messengers, and their true motives. The hypocrisy in their criticisms and the inability to acknowledge what the people clearly see and dislike. Not all Democrats are bad, but the progressives taking over the party operate in ecosystems of their own narratives and will bring the party down. A big thank you to all of you in the audience. Your viewership is appreciated and valued. Please follow the Christopher Peter Review on social media and continue to visit www.crcreview.com for new episodes. Thank you once again. Until next time.